I turned everything off: phone, laptop, smartwatch, even the one that just shows the weather, gone. I went offline like stepping into the past. No mountain retreat, just a normal day in a normal city without a single screen. And believe me, the first 15 minutes felt like I had lost a limb. My fingers twitched, my eyes searched for a glowing rectangle, my mind scrambled for a point of control. Where are my notifications? Did someone message me? What if something urgent? Yeah, nothing was. This wasn't a bold experiment. It was a desperate attempt to remember who I was before the digital noise, before I spent more time with screens than with my own thoughts. Unplugging. Sounds noble, like, oh, I'm doing a little digital detox today. But the truth is, we're all hooked. We're not just checking our phones, we're checking if we still exist. Did anyone like my post? Did someone see what I'm doing? Am I still relevant? The first few hours without gadgets weren't about freedom. They were about withdrawal. Information withdrawal. Emotional withdrawal. Because everything around us is designed to keep us from being alone with ourselves. We're supposed to be constantly available, to respond, to reply, to show up. But here's the paradox. The more we're connected, the less we're actually present in our own lives. I realized this when, for the first time in years, I woke up to silence. Yes, I used an old mechanical alarm clock. It ticks, it really ticks, and it was weirdly beautiful. Then breakfast, no news, no YouTube, no just in the background. And for the first time, I actually smelled the coffee. Not, smells nice, but I really noticed it. Turns out, silence isn't emptiness, it's space. Space where forgotten things begin to speak, my own thoughts, my own rhythm, my inner voice, buried for years under podcasts, notifications, and someone else's opinions. And no, this isn't a story about reaching enlightenment in one day. It's a story about how I felt a little scared. Scared of how much I had forgotten how to simply be, and how easily I replaced presence with scrolling. And if you're thinking, please, I could go a day without my phone, spoiler, 20 minutes in, you'll be talking to your kettle. Morning. The first shock. I woke up to silence, not the melody of an alarm, not the buzz of a notification, just silence. It felt almost physical. The kind of silence that unsettles you at first. The world wasn't rushing me. And that felt strange. Walked into the kitchen. Instinctively, my hand reached for my phone. It wasn't there. That's when I realized just how physical that movement had become, like a smoker reaching for a cigarette after a meal. The phone isn't just a device anymore. It's a ritual, it's a pause, it's how we fill the silence, and without it, the silence remained. I sat down for breakfast. No podcast, no background noise, no distractions. Turns out, coffee smells different when you're not trying to photograph it. Oatmeal even sounds different. Yes, sounds, when you're just eating it, not watching YouTube. I noticed the quiet clink of the spoon against the bowl. I'd never heard that sound before. My brain was searching, looking for something to hold on to. News, a video, messages, and I just sat there. For the first time in ages, I ate slowly. Not because I was trying to be mindful, but because there was nothing else to do. Then I remembered. This is what mornings used to feel like. No screen, no likes, no urgency, just you, the sun, and a cup of tea. When did that become unusual? Midday, nostalgia for the past midday. The time when work chats usually light up, news feeds boil over, and my head buzzes from fresh waves of information. But today, silence. No pings, no vibrations. Just warm sunlight on the wall and a strange feeling, as if I've been cut off from the world, and yet closer to life than I've been in months. I sit by the window and realize, when was the last time I simply remembered? Not planned, not solved, not consumed, but truly remembered, and suddenly memories begin to flood in. I remember how we used to say, "Let's meet by the swings at 4 p.m., and we'd meet. No calls, no "where are you?" Just trust. We waited, we laughed. If someone didn't show up, we didn't panic. It just meant they couldn't make it. Today we text 15 times, confirming every minute, every step, and still show up late, because everything can be pushed to tomorrow. I remember the old landline phone in the kitchen. I remember waiting for a call. There was no screen to check, seen, no reply. There were only feelings, intuition, anticipation. Today, we know the message was read, and still no response. And that silence hurts more than a full day without a call ever did. I remember knowing all the numbers by heart, friends, family, even the school cafeteria. Now? I'm not even sure I know my wife's phone number. My memory feels clouded. Everything lives in the phone, and my mind feels empty. The old clock on the wall ticks away, wooden, steady, marking time. And I realize time is real. It moves, without gadgets, without screens. It was always there. I just never noticed. This nostalgia I feel isn't sadness. It's clarity that I've traded something precious. Warmth for convenience, sensation for screens, intimacy for likes, and maybe, just maybe, getting it back isn't that hard. Maybe it starts with not picking up the phone. Funny, isn't it? We once dreamed of technology. Now we dream of resting from it. We used to admire smartphones. Now we admire people who can ignore them. So I sit here, alone, without gadgets, but not lonely. I'm with myself, with my memories, with this very moment, and for the first time in a long time, I'm not bored. Evening came unexpectedly quiet. Normally by this time, I'm already halfway into my phone, checking what others have posted, what I might have missed, how someone else's life looks today. But tonight, empty, or rather, free. I went for a walk, no headphones, no destination, just stepped out of the house and followed wherever my eyes wandered. And suddenly, I noticed trees, birds, the sound of my own footsteps on the pavement, the wind wrapping gently around my face. All of it had always been there. I just hadn't seen it. Not because I was blind, but because my mind was always stuck on another screen. I stopped by a cafe, met up with a friend. We rarely saw each other, and even when we did, one of us was always glancing at our phones, but this time was different. 2 hours of real conversation, as if we were in another dimension. He shared something he'd been holding for years, and I listened, truly listened. Not waiting for my turn to speak, but just being present. And that's when I realized our phones have trained us to be physically close but emotionally absent. We sit next to each other, yet we're always somewhere else. Back home, I picked up a paper book, not to be virtuous, but because there was nothing else to grab, and you know. What? It felt like sinking into warm water. Every word, like a breath, every page, like a slow step. I remembered how, as a child, books were portals. Now they feel too long for our scattered attention. We don't read anymore. We skim. We don't live. We scroll. Before bed, I just lay there. Not scrolling, not checking emails, not starting another show, just lying in the dark with my thoughts. At first, it was unsettling, like I'd forgotten something important. But then, silence. And in that silence came forgotten ideas, forgotten sensations, forgotten memories. The kind that used to drown in all the noise. I realized boredom isn't the enemy. It's the space where imagination returns, where inspiration comes back, where I come back, the real me, not the version shaped by algorithms, clicks, and likes. That night, I didn't feel disconnected. I felt connected to reality, to myself, And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of missing something online, because I understood the most important things are already here, inside me, in this evening, in this breath. Night didn't come all at once. It crept in gently, almost as if it didn't want to disturb me. The house was dark, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel scary. It felt peaceful. I just lay there, no scrolling, no checking emails, just one more episode, just me, in silence, with my thoughts. At first, it was unfamiliar, almost unsettling, as if I'd forgotten something important, like there should be one more task, one more sound, one more notification. But nothing came. And then, something else arrived. A pause, a silence, and in that silence, images began to rise. They didn't come from the outside, but from within. Childhood dream. A conversation I never had the courage to start. A melody I once loved and hadn't heard in years. I realized that everything I once called me was still there. It had just gone quiet. Not because it disappeared, but because I kept shouting over it. Gadgets don't steal our time. They steal space. The sacred space where real thoughts are born. Not reactions, but realizations. Not headlines, but meaning. I remembered how long it had been since I felt this state of just being, not rushing, not needed by anyone, and not feeling guilty about it. Just existing. Like the sky, like a tree, like breath. When you don't have to compete. When you don't have to be interesting. When you're allowed to simply be. And that's not laziness, not apathy. It's restoration. It's a return to your body, your senses, yourself. I felt my heartbeat, not metaphorically, literally. Each beat, each pause between them, and with every beat, a reminder I'm alive. Not digital. Not convenient, not optimized, but alive, whole, real. I lay there thinking about everything we lose while scrolling through our screens, the meetings that never happened, the words that were never spoken, the thoughts we never got to think because we were too busy consuming others. Boredom isn't the enemy. It's the entryway into depth, into stillness, into truth. I didn't feel lonely. I felt spacious, warm, breathing, alive, and lying there in complete stillness, I understood something simple. We're not afraid of disconnecting from the world. We're afraid of being alone with ourselves. But that's exactly where it begins, where there is no signal, no screen, no noise. That's where true presence begins. And that night, I didn't fall asleep with a phone in my hand. I fell asleep with the feeling that I had finally come home. Night didn't come all at once. It crept in gently, almost as if it didn't want to disturb me. The house was dark, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel scary. It felt peaceful. I just lay there. No scrolling, no checking emails, just one more episode. Just me. In silence. With my thoughts. At first it was unfamiliar, almost unsettling, as if I'd forgotten something important, like there should be one more task, one more sound, one more notification, but nothing came. And then, something else arrived. A pause. A silence. And in that silence, images began to rise. They didn't come from the outside, but from within. Childhood dream. A conversation I never had the courage to start. A melody I once loved and hadn't heard in years. I realized that everything I once called me was still there. It had just gone quiet. Not because it disappeared, but because I kept shouting over it. Gadgets don't steal our time. They steal space, the sacred space where real thoughts are born. Not reactions, but realizations. Not headlines, but meaning. I remembered how long it had been since I felt this state of just being, Not rushing, not needed by anyone, and not feeling guilty about it. Just existing. Like the sky, like a tree, like breath. When you don't have to compete, when you don't have to be interesting, when you're allowed to simply be, and that's not laziness, not apathy. It's restoration. It's a return to your body, your senses, yourself. I felt my heartbeat, not metaphorically, literally, each beat, each pause between them, and with every beat, a reminder, I'm alive, not digital, not convenient, not optimized, but alive, whole, real. I lay there thinking about everything we lose while scrolling through our screens, the meetings that never happened, the words that were never spoken, the thoughts we never got to think because we were too busy consuming others. Boredom isn't the enemy, it's the entryway into depth, into stillness, into truth. I didn't feel lonely. I felt spacious, warm, breathing, alive. And lying there in complete stillness, I understood something simple. We're not afraid of disconnecting from the world. We're afraid of being alone with ourselves. But that's exactly where it begins. Where there is no signal, no screen, no noise. That's where true presence begins. And that night, I didn't fall asleep with a phone in my hand. I fell asleep with the feeling that I had finally come home. I didn't save the world. I didn't make any grand discoveries. Simply spent one day without a screen. But what I uncovered ran much deeper. I didn't expect it to be so terrifying to simply be without validation, without external approval, without that constant mental ping. I realized we don't just use our gadgets, we've grown into them. They've become mirrors where we search for ourselves. But what if the real reflection isn't on the screen, but inside? It was hard to stay silent when I wanted to share. Hard. Not to reach for my phone when there was a pause. But beyond that withdrawal, beyond that discomfort, was freedom. Turns out, I remember more than I thought. Turns out, the people I love, they can wait. Turns out, there isn't emptiness inside. Me, as I feared, but stillness, space, breath. Now I know, boredom is an invitation, not to a new show, but to yourself. When was the last time you looked up at the sky just because? When did you eat without rushing, just with presence? When did you breathe? Not because you had to, but because you were alive. So here's my challenge to you. Try it. It doesn't have to be 24 hours. Start with 2 or even 1. Turn it all off. Tell the world, I'll be back. And tell yourself, I'm here. Just be. No filters, no plans, no checking for likes. Just be you. Then come back and share what you found. In the silence, in the pause, in that return to yourself. The world won't stop. It'll keep buzzing, updating, demanding. But you'll no longer be the same. Because you made it through. Because you remembered. Being is more powerful than appearing. Because you reclaimed something no one else can give you. Your time, your presence, your clarity. If this video gave you something to think about, share it with those always busy, with those feeling drained, with those who've forgotten how to just be. Save this video. Return to it when the world gets too loud. Subscribe if you want to keep walking this path, not toward productivity, but toward presence. And as always, stay with yourself, stay with your truth, stay with your stillness, stillness and espresso, your ritual of clarity.